Welcome back to World 101X, the anthropology of current world issues. This week, we start a new and our last module called Life Within Limits. It's named after the title of a book by anthropologist Michael Jackson. I caught up with Michael at Walden Pond in Concord in the United States. That's where Henry David Thoreau wrote his famous book, Walden, in which he describes his time living in the woods, reflecting on self-reliance, simplicity, self-sufficiency, and life with nature. No better place to discuss life within limits. But first, let me briefly introduce the next 3 weeks. First, we'll explore consumption and the economy in Cuba. Then, water scarcity in the Atacama Desert in Chile. And finally, what life is like for refugees in Malaysia. Now over to Michael.
Well, I guess I would see all those modes of relationship that you've talked about as informed by ethical considerations or ethical struggle, by which I mean there's no pre-formulated way in which people can simply follow a script and relate to things or other people, particularly in situations of precariousness and scarcity, as if that's all you have to do. Life within limits as an ethical affair means that people are struggling to find a way around obstacles, a way of getting under or over something which is blocking their path. So it involves a great deal of kind of inventiveness, which must, in a sense, pay respects to what is already codified as correct conduct, but must of necessity depart from it in some way. And the way I understand this ethical struggle, as it were, to work out a modus vivendi for yourself and for others that are part of your kind of beloved community, is very, very cognate with what Marcel Mauss called reciprocity, because you're always kind of saying, what am I obliged to give? What can I rightfully expect to receive from the world? And insofar as I have received something, what do I have to give back? And I think this is something which connects with people in affluent and impoverished circumstances equally. These kind of considerations, it seem to me, are kind of universal and transcend circumstance. And I think those are some of the issues that emerged out of the empirical fieldwork in Sierra Leone, but also have kind of come to me through work and thinking in a variety of other settings.
Do you think there's a difference when you talk about within limits? There's a difference between limits that are imposed from the outside and limits that we perhaps impose upon ourselves? Of course, both of those work together. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, insofar as we have internalized certain standards and notions of the good and the true and the right, there is a limit that our own conscience imposes. But it's interesting that people in extremis will often, in a sense, transgress even those limits, even though they felt guilt-stricken, profoundly remorseful, and will often describe themselves as having descended into animality in order to survive. So it seems to me that, the evidence is that there's no limit that is not insurmountable or cannot be transgressed by human beings, even eating the bodies of other kind of members of your own species who have died in order to survive. But there are some people who can't overcome even those limits, who will not do it, and who will prefer to die rather than kind of, transgress that.
we're not going to those extreme limits in this course, but we will look at how limits can be transgressed and how people do this in the next 3 episodes. All 3 episodes focus on a specific part of how people deal with living their life within limits, be they externally imposed or internally imagined. We all have limits placed upon us, be they our time on this planet, our ability to travel and move across the planet, our language abilities, or resources available to us, money, income, land, etc. It's what we do with these limits that is of interest. In this first episode, in this module, we focus on the economy and how Cubans deal with living in a national socialist system that is also externally curtailed by sanctions. Now, these structural limits to everyday life are imposed on people, which means they cannot escape it, nor can they fundamentally change these conditions. In this episode, we'll meet Ana Cristina Perchiera, an anthropologist who has worked in Cuba for the past 10 years, trying to understand how people live with little access to consumer goods and economic stability. We will follow her to her field site in the very south of Cuba, called Santiago de Cuba. But first, we catch up with her in Havana, Cuba's iconic capital.